Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful guitar music. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm hosting tonight with our series founder, WordWorks Karen Alanier, and our guest co-host, Susan Oakey. Henry Crawford, tech wizard extraordinaire, is behind the scenes making everything work. Our featured poets tonight are A. Van Jordan and Sally Rosen Kindred. Susan will introduce A. Van Jordan, and I'll introduce Sally Rosen Kindred. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. The links for buying books and making a donation will be in the chat. Audience members have been muted. This helps prevent feedback problems for our readers and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. Unfortunately, they do sometimes happen, but I know you'll forgive us if they do. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. Be sure to tune into the WordWorks Poets versus the Pandemics program, which will be on Wednesday, March 16th at 7 o'clock, and will feature poet Indran Amirthanayagam. And please join us for our next Café Muse meeting on Monday, April 4th, which will feature poets Barbara Goldberg and J.C. Todd. And now, I'm delighted to turn the mic over to Susan Oakey.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome tonight. When I first encountered A. Van Jordan's poetry in his second book, Magnolia, I was mesmerized by the way Jordan celebrated in his poems the life of Magnolia Cox, a young Ohio girl who was the first African-American to reach the final round of the National Spelling Bee right here in Washington, D.C. During the bee, she was denied victory when judges from the South assigned her a word not on the official list. Jordan is widely recognized as a master of the persona poem, as well as a consummate craftsman who employs a range of formal strategies to present unusual speakers and shed light on subjects that we may never have thought about or never have seen clearly. A lover of classic movies who also studied filmmaking, he devoted his book, The Cineast, to poems about the films he has loved. And woven through that collection are poems that present the life and career of Oscar Micheaux, a Black man of the early 20th century who wrote novels and made films to fight racism and injustice. In 1919, with the Chicago premiere of his movie, The Homesteader, Micheaux became the first African-American to make a feature-length film. Tonight, Jordan will be reading from his new forthcoming collection, When I Waked, I Cried to Dream Again. He writes that the book, quote, examines the death of Tamir Rice and other Black lives lost during encounters with police, while it also draws comparisons to Black characters in Shakespeare plays, Caliban and Sycorax from The Tempest, Aaron the Moor from Titus Andronicus, and Othello, the eponymous hero of that play. What do these characters have in common with the deaths of Black people in the 21st century? Both the characters in the plays and the African Americans who died in police custody find themselves described by white figures who initially besmirch their names. And in doing so, they work to define who they are before we can decide who these Black figures are for ourselves. In the case of Tamir Rice, he is first described as a, quote, a man with a gun, even though he was 12 years old with a toy gun. A. Van Jordan is the author of 4 collections: Rise, published in 2001, which won the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award; Magnolia, 2005, listed as one of the best books of 2005 by the London Times; Quantum Lyrics, 2007, and The Cineast, 2013. He has been awarded a Whiting Writers Award, an Anisfield Wolf Book Award, and a Pushcart Prize. He is the recipient of fellowships and other honors, including a Lannan Literary Award, that's a Lifetime Achievement Award in poetry, in 2015. He has taught at numerous institutions and currently teaches at the University of Michigan, where he is the Robert Hayden Collegiate Professor of English Language and Literature. That chair is named for the poet whom he counts as his most important influence. How lucky we are tonight to have the opportunity to hear poems from this exciting new collection. When I waked, I cried to dream again. Friends, please welcome poet A. Van Jordan.
Thank you, Susan, for that beautiful introduction. Susan, you did such a great job. I don't have to set much of this up anymore, which is what I was dreading. So thank you for that. And I just hope I can live up to the reading tonight. And I'm also excited to be here. I'm just happy to be asked to be a part of this great series. And I'm looking forward to hearing Sally Rosen Kindred's poems as well. And thanks for the beautiful classical guitar to set the mood for tonight. So I'm going to start, as Susan so eloquently noted, by reading some new poems from a collection that takes its title from a monologue of Caliban in The Tempest. There is a chapbook. I want to see my skirt. This chapbook is a section of the book that's coming out. It's the kind of the middle section. I'll say more about that in a little while. But I wanted to open by reading a poem that's a bit of an incantation, hopefully kind of setting the mood and just wishing us good spirits, despite its title. This is called Hex. The day of the spell was the day of cast shadows, of diaphanous figures whipped clean of fear. Angels ablaze sailing a coastline of hushed tete-a-tetes, adagio tenor wells laced with rage, smoke rising from the wells, from the laughter, just when the last local trains crawled into stations, just when televisions grew verdigris in homes obsolete from indolence, just when black signatories erased their names and put on their boots, cirrus streaks formed on the skyline of the city. A mother held her barely alive son, the son to whom she vowed protection from harm. Having thrown a circle of gopher dust to enclose her enemies, she raises a totem over her head. It's now time. Let her wield the words of black declensions, new vows, the best nouns of home training, of damn good sense. Let her sit for a spell, wipe sleep from her eye. Let her obtain a license for what's lethal from whatever God has taken her image. Whenever the sun comes over the buildings, whenever the moon weighs more than the sun, more than Pisces and Neptune, walk to a street corner with plenty of witnesses where you'll bear no isolation. Sing your words facing north or even higher. Now walk backward through the chains of time from each past and current hindrance to our future. Invoke the names of those not seating privilege in boardrooms, the ones who oppress to their graves. Now summon each forgotten spirit, each fallen son. Bless each prayed up grandmother, each open door and vivid corridor. Bless the pain spared you, vicarious to you, passed down in your blood, carrying you through the dangers and the echoes of time. Remember, family echoes within your body. History pulls through you as you move through a day. Raise them in this prayer, let's call it, to that God who took your image. Go to the tree, to the home, to the street corner, and spread these words, tossing wreaths, spinning incantations, where torn life collapsed under a last breath. And so the next poem, thanks. The next poem, it's directly about Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice is kind of a touchstone in this collection, and you know he has a very specific tragedy, but it's also sort of a composite of many tragedies of this nature. I'm just going to read a little bit about this next poem or a couple of poems that'll set the scene here. For those who may not know, when officers Timothy Loman and Frank Garnbeck arrived at the Cuddle Recreational Center's gazebo on November 23rd, 2014, driving a squad car on the grass directly in front of the picnic table in which Tamir Rice sat, Tamir got up. Seeing a police car coming in hot at high speed, driving on grass in the middle of a park, and barely coming to a stop in front of you, who wouldn't get up from their seat? Initially, the report said that the officers shot within 2 seconds of seeing Tamir. But if you watch the video, as I have many times now, you'll see that the car hasn't settled to a stop before Tamir is shot. Later, it's revealed that they shot him in less than 2 seconds of pulling up. The timing of the killing is important. An argument made about the shooting, an argument that allowed the officers to justify their shooting, is that the airsoft pellet gun Tamir was carrying looked a good deal like a real Colt M1911 semi-automatic pistol. But this would only be important if Tamir had a chance to pull out the toy, and if the officers had time to see it and to assess whether it looked lethal. If you shoot someone before they have a chance to resist or to pull a weapon or to issue a threat, are you really killing them because you feel threatened? What then could you be threatened by, seeing a 12-year-old black boy standing in front of you? And the poem is called Airsoft. Like a whisper from a friend telling a secret, the gun reveals itself only to invite, not start any trouble, mind you, just to invite the boy who listens to come out to play. And the boy knows not so much what the gun's pellet says as he understands what the pellet will mean to say, whistling through a windy afternoon past onlookers who neither hear nor see the streak of inhuman intent searing through the ether. So he takes his airsoft pellet gun in hand, as he might take his laces in hand, to tighten them more securely around his juvenile ankles. That's to say, without much care, but just out of habit before taking off to run. Everyone runs faster with tight laces. This makes sense, of course, and the hope to run can excite as much as hitting full stride with wind washing over a boy's face. The toy guns masquerade as lethal guns in a boy's dreamland where no one dies, where they simply lie down and play dead, but they live to play on. As mysterious as a cat in a box, a toy gun in a black boy's pocket. The gun neither dead nor alive unless offered a chance to empty his pocket to solve the paradox of what a day might hold. This next poem is made up of kind of sapphic fragments. It comes from an exercise I do with my students. And it's a little epigraph from Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 2. I am dead, thou livest. Report me and my cause aright to the unsatisfied. And this is called Fragments of Tamir's Body. The body's shadow had much to say, but no one in earshot understood its language. The clouds stood heavy, and when the cops confronted the body, the boy showed his prowess to indulge in play, just one of his many gifts which scared onlookers. No black man appeared in the park, just a child, just people judging him. As he approached, she wondered how she'd explain him to her father. The opportunities for joy presented themselves in more colors than the boy could name, so he chose black, enjoying them all. Passers-by who laughed at him showed their gratitude by memorizing his face, then by wielding his visage whenever they found themselves in a jam. Was his laughter a declaration of his joy, or a sacred prayer offered over poor souls resigned to their fate? corn chips, black licorice, marbles, plastic pellets, toy gun, jawbreakers, bubble gum, crushed apogee of memory. When he imagines knowing then what he now knows, he imagines dying before his time. A jar of preserved pears, canned by his grandmother, occupies his mind. When he gets home, a man beats a drum in courtship to his beloved. Nah, a boy dribbles a basketball, boasting of his youth. A saga took place in the mind of the police as they glimpsed the black child who was caught smiling as he walked toward them. His sister's scream pulled from a well too black to ring shallow, echoes whenever his name. Okay, so I'll read one more Tamir poem. This is Bored, Tamir Chooses to Dream. Well, once a path is chosen, there's no limit to where you might arrive. Imagine his playing high above layered rooftops and along the edges of trees, at one point following the curving line of the park or the grade of the grass, at another the invisible whims of the breeze. Imagine him shearing off as soon as the range of the city's rooftops disappear and deciding here is where I'll drum, here is where I'll play the cop and the robber, and here I'll fall asleep like a bird tucked head under wing, a world of limbs and leaves to support me. Once a boy dreams, there's no limit to where he might soar off, above pointing fingers and straining voices trying to name his species. A boy like that would seek a laughter loud enough to reach him, above anything pointed at him, above anyone approaching him, above any sound thin enough to pass through the gossamer of his dreams and just disappearing into a murmur below him, too faint to offer a reason to look at what could possibly disturb the object of his day. Okay. So I'll read a few poems from this, the middle section of the book, but also from the chapbook. So this chapbook is a collaboration, as you can see, between me and Colleen Smith, the filmmaker Colleen Smith, award-winning filmmaker, is probably most known for her film Dry Long So, which was the audience favorite at Sundance many years ago. But what we did was we had these photographs by Malik Sidibe. Malik Sidibe is as a Malian photographer who is known primarily for capturing the lives of the youth of Mali during their independence. What was going on was that the young people were living under this time when the elders were saying, we're going to go back to our roots and just we're going to eschew all Western culture, music, clothing, food, everything is going to be distinctly Malian. And the young people were saying, because this was the late 60s going into the 70s, wait a minute, the civil rights movement is going on in the States. Motown is going on. James Brown is happening. The Beatles, everything is going on in the States. We kind of want some of that. So what they would do is they would have these underground parties, and they would go to a tailor, and they'd have different magazines and ask the tailor to sew them a suit like the Beatles or a dress like the Supremes. And they'd go out and they'd have these underground parties. Well, Malik Sidibe was there, and he captured this on camera, and Uh, the photographs are beautiful. So what we have with this is a three-way collaboration. Um, she asked me to look at the photographs and to create a narrative and through my poems. And then she in turn shot a film based on the narrative. And so within the chapbook, you'll see there are these little tipped in photos of from the stills from the film. And so I'll read a few of these just to set the mood. The main girl we follow here is a child that I've decided to call Roka. Um, there's a picture of this little girl in a skirt, no top, and she's just so excited about this little skirt that she's gotten. Um, and anyway, so this you'll see in the poem, hopefully. Roka discusses her photo as girl in skirt. It's the eyes, not the clothes, that reveal the most of my photographs. And this one in particular, already topless, subversive, flip-flops and that linen skirt, hand on hip, hoop earrings and all. Everyone should have seen the woman in me coming of age. At once the young woman, me, age 7 in this photo, looks like a child who might be in a hallway in her school, in front of her classroom on a Friday, or on her way to enjoy youthful curiosity. But look again at her eyes, and one might see the look of a woman, me after a full workday, after a fight with a boss, after the last hope for play has begun to dim. Notice the tiles leading nowhere on which I stand. Notice the eyes are guided toward the beyond, as if I'm looking past my observer, which one may interpret as rude. One might also interpret this as a look of desperation, need, or despair. Think of these eyes as a photo inside this photo of the aftermath of 3 hours in some church. These eyes know nothing of parties after dark or laws against nudity, only a chance to do her part for her family. The eyes stare as distinct luminous guides inside the house or the town, guiding like two dogs leading us through her day, and weighted steps falling and rising like the day's light that beams and weakens in the same instant, beating the odds of her frailty, knocking on doors, passing the time with dreams, seeking light on the other side of the walls. And thanks. A good number of these poems are in forms, and so the tailor, because of the weaving and the assemblage of the clothes, the tailor is written in a sestina. So hopefully we'll hear some of that here. This is the tailor. You've come to me and asked for a dream, something you've seen in a magazine. You now want me to make into a reality, to sow, in effect, a new reality for you. You pay me a visit, but this is really home for you. Yet, like a stranger, you ask for a way to fit in. Well, lucky for you, style is my business. I can make anything I can see. Style is at home wherever you find it. It's more than a dream. It's a way to speak to the world like a stranger making a new friend. Before you were an outsider, now with a new suit or dress, it's as if you're revisiting a familiar place. You tell me what you want, and I'll sew. Your part in this is easy. Don't think so hard about clothes. Think about you. Style must be worn more than the fabric itself. Visit the possibilities in the pages of Vogue and dream into my fingers. Don't hesitate in this life. Now is the time to tell the onlookers to cease being strangers. Welcome them to you with new clothes. Don't feel strange about standing out. Just allow me to sew the world around your bones in the here and the now, and let history fall at your well-heeled feet. A new style is always welcome, despite how it despite how it bangs against dreams of uniforms and boots and steps. The guns visiting our homes at night. They want us pinned inside, not to visit the rest of this world. A new cut to an old suit seems strange to some, but most will come to appreciate your dream and will come to me in time at night and ask me to sew their lives into lines that speak peace. A new style walks as politicians ask us to wait. We demand now for the freedom to express with our bodies. Now, don't get me wrong, clothes only protect flesh. A visit to a tailor is like going to church. Spirit, always in style, worships through what one wears. How strange this world would be if we were all in uniform. Sad to sew a garment for someone who wasn't allowed to dream. Now, go forth in the alluring clothes of the stranger and visit others as if a needle and thread sewed not just a new style into this world, but also a new dream. Um, so I'll close with one more poem from the new manuscript. Um, just want to say, thanks again for listening and for the invite to be a part of this evening. Okay, so this is how to celebrate a revolution. Say something benign about the weather to begin. Whether it's raining or not, just exclaim, "What a lovely day it is," using the same inflection with your enemies as with your neighbors. Once the sea change comes, people will prove too bored with disbelief to argue, surrendering to hope. At this late hour, when the country believes it's grown, when twilight teaches the heartland a lesson about nuance, we come together to talk about the news we love to watch. So we watch another child die muted on dashcam video. We can almost see life rise from the child's body like a silent prayer floating off to who knows where. At this late hour, we nearly give up on one another. We stay home. We stop making love. We turn station after station looking for the revolution, believing it will appear on the higher stations in HD. And why, I ask my aging bones, why don't you dance? Struck dumb, I point to the TV reminding me daily when the music stopped. At this late hour, the reality show shows our own lives, and yet we continue to watch, hoping still for life to work out, but not without some drama. The screen flickers in the dark. You turn to your beloved, asking, "Did you understand the ending?" You stare hard into each other. You go to bed. My people, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about how difficult love is when a country gets involved, interrupting those mornings when a mother waves goodbye to her child, who, framed in the window of a school bus, waves back. Mother and child both believing the other will be okay, but both waving gently behind glass, fearing the other will break. Later that night, talking about their day, they listen to each other so closely they're almost a better world. When we look out across the city into the faces of others, we're supposed to believe the world was made big to keep us from feeling lonely. When we look out across rural vistas, we're supposed to believe the world was made vast so we could run as far as we wanted and no one would tell us to stop. My dear people, my neighbors, my conveyors of hopes and workers of Gordian knots and breakers of stout chains, I sow within you like a farmer who plants faith in the harvest, while the ashes remind us and the birds encourage us, and the indolent lounge under a flaming sky, while the news carries our fear even as we live it. While you leave your homes even today to compose love letters and petitions of yourself and the world, I am staggered by many acts of hope and the steps taken one foot after another released in this moment of history carried within you. Like a day carries within it morning and night. Long after today, we will see a flicker in the mind, a Polaroid, a memory shaken into focus. Imagine before the show of your life feels with static snow on screen, you look outside and decide, not see, but decide there is snow on the front lawn. You jump on the white dance floor, stomping with your boots until your neighbors come outside to see just what the hell is going on. Well, affected by your groove, they unplug, they join in. We all do. And we continue long into night, into the coming day, a soul train of revolt lining rural routes and filling streets in our cities with our dance. Thank you.
Thank you, Van. Those were just remarkable and so very moving. I feel like we should just sit here for a moment, but moving on, I'm honored to introduce our next poet, Sally Rosen Kindred. Sally is the author of 3 poetry collections. Her newest book, Where the Wolf, won the Diode Editions Book Prize and was published in 2021. Her earlier books, Book of Asters and No Eden, were both published by May Apple Press, who I have to add is also my publisher. She's also the author of 3 chapbooks, Garnet Lanterns, published in 2006, Darling Tongue, published in 2013, and Says the Forest to the Girl, published in 2018. Her poems have appeared in many journals and anthologies, including the Gettysburg Review, Shenandoah, Poetry Northwest, the Massachusetts Review, and Kenyon Review Online. Sally has received 2 individual artist grants from the Maryland State Arts Council. She's a teaching artist for the Poetry Barn and for John Hopkins' CTY program. As I read Where the Wolf, I was struck by how her poetry braids together archetypes, folklore, and myth with the speaker's inner and outer landscapes. The objects of daily life have agency, and their actions are sometimes comforting and sometimes ominous. A dark fairy tale grows in the forest. The wolf turns the Little Red Riding Hood story on its head, becoming a symbol of the power that runs deep in the veins of womanhood, of creativity, and a creature that snatches the speaker back from death. The wolf is everywhere. She comes into being in the protagonist's preteen years when her parents divorce, steps out of forests, from the bark of trees, lives in neighborhood dogs who comfort the girl, accompanies the speaker into the nursing home when she visits her mother who is suffering from dementia, promises the speaker respite in death. I say protagonist because this is a poetry collection where every poem is spoken in the same voice, even though the story is nonlinear and the age of the speaker varies from poem to poem. Sally has mastered the art of weaving the strange into a powerful and poignant collection of poems about loss, about maidenhood and motherhood, what it's like to be a daughter whose mother is sickened by sadness and dementia, and to be her mother herself with a son who is growing out of her reach. She uses language in startling ways. Grammar and punctuation twist to serve her needs and heighten the poem's emotional temperature. Even the meanings of words veer off in surprising directions. The result is surprising and refreshing, opening cracks in our familiar language that reveals even more meaning. Reviewer Angela Ellis, writing in Cultural Daily, says, Kindred's poems are magic mirrors, reflecting the fears and desires that shimmer beyond every day. She goes on to say, Sally Rosen Kindred's work is a testament to a journey that stretches from childhood to old age, and to the struggles that spur the imagination and create the enduring beauty of Where the Wolf. Now, let me give you Sally Rosen Kindred so you can experience her wonderful poems yourself.
My goodness, thank you so much, Ellen, for that introduction. I'm so grateful for it, that careful and generous reading of the poems. And I also want to thank everybody at Café Muse for including me and letting me participate in this way. It's wonderful to be here. I was going to list everybody's name, but now I'm nervous and I don't think I can do it. So I'm just going to say everyone, all the wonderful co-hosts at Café Muse, because I'm afraid I'll leave somebody out. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And also, I don't really know how to read poems after A. Van Jordan. That was an incredible and breathtaking reading, really powerful work. Oh my goodness, the Tamir Rice poems, the fragments, the Sistina. I want to just sit with it, but okay, I'm going to read some stuff. I almost feel like apologizing for talking after those terrific, stunning poems. I am going to read tonight from Where the Wolf, which is a book out from Diode Editions. It came out in June of 2021. And it was kind of a long time in the making. I am going to start by reading the first poem from the book, which is actually called First Night. 2 hours after my father left for good, with his wet hair lamp gleam black and his zippered bag, my mother pulsed through the house, turning off all the lights. I followed her, then sat on the rug in the dark, watching smoke twist up from her cigarette and drop small stars to burn into her blouse, black with blue roses. I did not yet believe in the kitchen to come, in bottles that lit and littered the air, tilting here from the future, that God could lay her down years on that couch. I looked up at her. I touched the rug's braid. Behind her head, 4 cold windows. Beyond them, outside, in grass moon wet with night, a ghost wolf guarded the yard. In memory, she moves out now from the alders and skirts the silver swings. Her tufts bristle in the grass. We had called her name with a snap of the switch on the glass white globe, turn of the lamp's brass key, with our breath and fingers. Without that dark, wolf could never have found us. She could not have come to me, would not have felt safe. My mother was sagging already, losing stars, buckling under her story. Pain found me wolf's ghost body, gave me never and fur. I dreamed, I hid, I held, I would not tell. So thanks. That poem introduces a family that is fracturing, that is followed throughout the collection of poems. The daughter becomes a mother, and just the adult daughter of a mother with dementia. We'll get there. But it also introduces a wolf, and there are many wolves in the book, but there is that particular wolf in the first poem who does wind her way in and out of the poems to come. So the next poem is a poem about that wolf, and it is a she. And the poem is called Is She? You think this is a poem where the wolf. The forest, after all, is a sleeve of glass daggers. You, the girl, cold throat, wet shoes. Wolf is the ghost of a hurt remembering itself. Is she? You can hear her between trees. You can see the ghost her mouth was, weaving wet fur in the shards. If the forest is an altar built in the crack of your lost one's femur, then this is the moment when the girl is you kneeling before it. Wolf says the scarlet bird is the one with a scar in it. Wolf says, gather stones. will be the end of the story of the wolf moving slowly across the sentence you have been speaking since before you were born. You say what a stone says in the pocket of your dress and forget you were ever a wing. So yeah, they're wolves in the book, and that's one of them. And yeah, she does stick around. The next poem I'm going to read goes back to that family that's fracturing. And actually, well, those first two poems that I have read several times to introduce the book. I don't know how else to introduce the book. This poem I have never read, ever. So I read it aloud. My cats have heard the poem, but I haven't read it in a reading. So have fun, guys. And I think you'll know why I haven't read it when I read it, but good luck to me. The poem is called The Grief Dress. Cinched tight by a belt's hard braid, its cotton shirtwaist pleats parched like earth. The brown dress made me a sparrow. Then it made me a lost bride. It made me the ghost of my Boston mother, the one who'd sat on a stack of field guides to learn guitar. 25 years since she'd scraped her frets across the skirt, and now my father was coming to take me to dinner. He'd just filed for divorce. She said I'd need a dress. She stood to pull it from the hanger, passed it into my hands, and sat back down on her side of the bed while I worked each button loose, swung it over my hair, cold skin. In the dogwood through the glass, a cracked nest. She stood again to knot me in. We turned to me in the mirror. She looked away before she said it. Good fit. Then I got married in that dress. Too late, his Chevy humming in the drive and my ribs tight in that plot. Could I have asked for mercy then? For forgiveness? Could I have unfastened the buttons of my breath? That dress, the color of dirt, raveled and chafed as I climbed in the car. I turned to him and spoke, bound by a wild song, strum of our bodies, strum of wings to the ground, common hum in the lungs' dark seam. Yeah, okay, I read that one. So some of the poems are about daughterhood and some of the poems are about motherhood. This next one is a poem about motherhood. I have two sons, wonderful sons. I started to say teenage sons, but one of them is 16 and one of them is 20, which means he's not a teenager anymore. And having sons is terrifying. I mean, I guess anybody who has sons knows this, but if you don't, oh my gosh, it's terrifying. So I'm just going to leave that there. And the fact that my sons have survived or are surviving their adolescence is to me a miracle every day. I'm not responsible for that. It's amazing, and I'm in awe. This poem is to my son who is now 16, but written to him when he was 10. When sons are full of all kinds of things, and oh my gosh, when he was 10, it would have been 2015. So just do with that what you will. There was a lot happening in the United States in 2015. And for what it's worth, I am an adoptive parent. We're a transracial family. It's all very complicated. But this poem is for that son. And it's also for another young man that I have some empathy for, Charles Dickens. So Charles Dickens, when he was 10, which he was at one point, was working to get his family out of debtor's prison. He was working all day, every day, and in Victorian times, there weren't child labor laws, in the factory labeling Black ink cans. So this poem is called To Dickens at 10. I'll see you at the fair end of Wish Street, then Hungerford Stairs, horse dung, mud-crowned boots, skin of soot. I see you gluing the 53rd paper label to the blacking can and wishing the work undone, the way later your words would peel a salt husk off a star. I see creases in your bending hand through the skin of your story's dirty attic glass. I see you. I have a son your age. I have a boy who wakes at 6 to make paper in his own image, to tear the pulp flat world into wings. And Charles, it's all violence, the rise of his bones from the sheets, the ripping back. In blue hours, he tears from sleep to make his books, to make them feathers, spears, make shields and songs of shields, so the papers swell over the rug, pile like choked fish in the Thames, and fill the ashy rivers of our afternoons. He makes airplanes, Charles, if you could just imagine. And I think about spontaneous combustion. I think you would understand the hunger, the fear, the expectation of fire. And I put the kettle on and wish your mother morning in a warm white cup, an easy death. Too late, I wish her hand on your hands, well turned and warm as ash. The next two poems I'm going to read are both speak to the experience of being an adult daughter of a mother with dementia. And this first poem was sort of inspired by the experience of calling my mother on her birthday, telling her it was her birthday because she did not know. And her response, which she was gracious and happy, and then asked me what my birthday was, so she could write it down, so she could call me when it was time. And that sort of whole moment of realizing that the person who was there when I was born doesn't remember it was kind of a paradigm shift. So when you don't have that story shared of your being born with your parent, what goes in its place? And that's one of the things that happens with these poems. They're fairy tale poems, and so what happens is a kind of tale that comes to replace that missing and forgotten story. This poem is called Mast Year, and a mast year is when there's an abundance of acorns. Mast Year. Now that my mother forgets me, I will stop being born. Instead, I'll tear from pine bark skin and end curled in this wood where it is always brown leaf and piano dusk, where foxes wait to nudge my soft crown. In a mast year, wood seeds fill the velvets of old trunks, where moss sweetens them in sleep. The foxes, also dreaming, judder their nut brown lids. I will not be my mother's doll or cradle, and will be theirs, red-furred for keening, until the branches teach me to creak. It's their story I'll tell if I ever speak. My mother still knows what a mast year is, remembers red oak stones she once called the color of our hair. Surfeit, grim dream, glut. Blood night acorns tick and swell, don't need a future, but I will still know her, no matter how full I am of their dark fruit, how far from her twilight tongue. I just have two more poems to read, and the next one is another poem to my mother, and it's kind of another attempt to tell a story in place of what's forgotten. This one is called When You Call My Body an Odd Thing. Once I was the sonnet inside you, fetal, compressed, remember our thirst? And what you wanted, garnet words turning in their beds. This was back when you held weather before you felt it break. Back before the fathers and their pills, the winds that shrilled and shrank us. Sorry, you almost wrote, rhyming worry into my heart's code. Once I was the umbrella. Inside you, the dead scent rain. I know now I was something held, your little shadow, little shade. I opened to catch a bright stigma of stars that fell across dark fields. Then our hurts became finger-painted roses, sealed, full-blown and folded flat, unpeeling into wet, mirrored blooms. Now you can't hold me anymore. You see the sky, strange and heavy. You hand me your lipstick, your purse, hard things that shine night black and away. You look into them and see your body, your body. Mother, if you don't know me now, don't you know the stone I was inside you? Can't you make room for the ring beneath your tongue? Just open your hand a minute, hold it. You don't have to call it blue or beautiful. You don't have to keep it warm. Thank you guys. I'm just gonna read one more poem, and I wanna thank you all again so much for being here, and it's such an honor to read with A. Van Jordan, and I'm so appreciative of Café Muse. This last poem actually isn't in the book. It was written after the book, but every time somebody reads this poem, they assume it's a pandemic poem, which I think is really interesting. It was actually written months before the pandemic. It was October, November 2019. And people don't believe me when I say that because it sounds, but guys, I am not psychic. I feel like people have forgotten. We also all felt the need to survive before the pandemic. I mean, not to trivialize what happened in the pandemic. It's been horrific, but you know, things weren't so great before then. So this poem does gesture towards the future. So this is what I've got, and it's the last one, and thanks again. It's called The Next Day. Let's pretend the last time I felt safe was just last week, that it felt like moonlight on my skin. Let's pretend the next day I went back into the woods and found a bonnet, a doll, and spiders still moving in the trees. Let's say the longleaf pines didn't die. The Fraser fir withstood threats of hands and threats of air. And so the Weller's salamander and the rock gnome lichen made a home there. The spruce fir moss spider could bend its legs like women bending at the waist to touch in thanks the grass hems of God. Let's pretend I don't need a glass of wine. I don't need a wet throat to say I believe my sons will walk to the store and home through the woods and our warped door. That nothing here belongs in the brute, moonless dark of a box made from fir and pine. Let's pretend the last time I felt safe was yesterday, was soon. Let's say we can put all our dark in a box. And a box is not always elegy, that the lid will bend easily like spider legs, like the legs of a galaxy in the black antler velvet night. And let's pretend I made the darkness up, because after all, it was made. No, let's thank the maker. Say tomorrow it got cool, and the next day cooler. Let's say we all survive. Thank you.
Sally, thank you for those really lovely poems that you read very well, even the one you read for the first time. They were terrific.
Thank you.
Next, Karen Alanier is going to conduct a Q&A with our wonderful poets.
First, let me just thank you both for such a magical evening of amazing words and pauses. I just feel that what we want to hear is if you would just pick one poem and talk a little bit about the process of how you created that particular poem, whether it was the words first or the feeling or the politics behind it. And, I think even though, Van had more of a political bent in some of his work, everything comes down to people and family. And so there's politics in all of those things. So let's start with you, Van, and see if you can pick out a poem and just walk us briefly through your process.
Sure. Well, first of all, just thanks again. And I just want to thank Sally again for reading with me tonight. This is just wonderful to hear those poems. And my mom is in late stages of Alzheimer's, so that they really resonate with me as well. So thank you. So yeah, I guess I'll talk a bit about the fragments of Tamir's body a bit. And you know, a lot of it is coming to me from just the deluge of the news and hearing the same story over and over again with different names plugged in, and spending time with Shakespeare, some of these plays, just kind of seeing similarly how many of the Black characters and Jewish characters would appear on stage after the white characters had sort of explained to the audience who this person is or will be when they appear. And so once that person appears, it's informed by what the other characters have said. And with Tamir just sort of taking the bits and pieces of data that was released out into the world, it was a while before we got the full picture. And so in thinking about that, I wanted to kind of reverse engineer it and think about having the full picture. What happens if we go back to the fragments and present the fragments with a fuller sense of who he actually was? I often will have do various exercises with my students, and particularly my undergrads, and looking at Sapphic fragments has always been a hit with them, because even the students who are the most intimidated about working in poetry, the idea of working with something and working with it in this kind of elliptical way is kind of freeing to them. The other thing is that often I find my students will think that in approaching the writing of a poem, they think they have to have all the answers. And sometimes working with fragments, it kind of builds a little muscle memory for them to understand that just sort of raising the question is enough. That's also valid.
Sally, how about you?
Sure. Well, I guess the first poem that occurs to me is the last poem that I read. That poem the next day, and I actually had a chance to share that poem with a high school class recently. So it's kind of, they asked how I wrote it, and I've been thinking about how, because I don't know how I wrote it. It just happened. But I have a tendency to walk in woods near my house before I write. I mean, in an ideal world, I walk before I write. There are plenty of days I don't do that. But this particular poem began from the experience of just being driven outside to walk because I was so anxious about so many things. And the anaphora of the poem, let's pretend, that was born from actually eavesdropping, which I highly recommend as a writing process. I was walking through the woods. There were children in the playground, little, preschool kids yelling, let's pretend this and let's pretend that. And it just kind of merged with my moment of peak anxiety. And I thought, yeah, I want to pretend. So there was kind of a moment there where I took that up, and I wanted the anaphora to kind of reflect that sort of obsessive place I was in, that psychic state. And so really it was just, and there was so much, I'm so neurotic, and there was so much in my head. There was really a lot to work with. But that wonderful idea that hit me from the outside, that as children, there is this way out, right? Sort of when you're trapped by anxiety, that gesture, that let's pretend, which is also a thing that can happen in poetry, was kind of the key to working through. Not that I've resolved all of my anxieties, but I do think that combination of the eavesdropping and being kind of reminded that that's a thing that poetry lets us do is pretend. And of course, there's the kind of dark irony underneath that I'm saying let's pretend about a lot of things that I feel like, don't have an escape valve. But I guess that's kind of the origin story of that poem.
Well, thank you. Thank you both, because I feel like we've both had a little mini masterclass from both of you. We learned that we can use the fragments and that we can eavesdrop, which is great. We really felt your intensity and your passion, and we thank you both so much for a wonderful evening.
I'm going to echo that. And also thank you, Karen, for your thought-provoking question. Van and Sally, you are wonderful. It was great to hear you, and thank you for sharing your poems with us. Michael, thank you as well. Your music was lovely, as it always is. And also, I want to thank Karen Alanier and the WordWorks for sponsoring Café Muse. Susan, thank you for guest co-hosting again with your usual grace and deep understanding of poetry. And thanks also to Henry for the technical magic, and to my fellow co-hosts, Renee Garrity, Leah Johnson, Henry Crawford, and Majda Gama. And most importantly, thanks to all of you, our wonderful audience, for being here. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it will be up on Café Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow, and you can extend your enjoyment by purchasing the poet's books. The link again is in the chat, and telling others about this series. Please join us for the WordWorks Poet versus the Pandemic program on Wednesday, March 16th at 7 o'clock, featuring poet Indra Amirthanayagam. I hope you can join us for the next Café Muse program as well, which will be on Monday, March 4th, actually, featuring poets Barbara Goldberg and J.C. Todd. Please make sure you've registered for the program on our Café Muse website so that you'll receive information on the event as well as the Zoom link. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the spring, and I hope we'll see you again next month.